And I have the presentation pulled up. Whenever you want me to share my screen, I could do that.
Right.
Perfect. And we are recording now, everybody, and we'll make one more mention as we have critical mass logged on. And I think Anastasia will kick us off and let you know when to share your screen, Ryan.
Right. Yeah. I think we'll let everybody, we typically have these advisory group meetings and introduce everybody, and then we share the screen and start in with the presentation. So we'll go ahead and get started since it's 11:30. Just wanted to welcome everybody here. I see a lot of we have our new consultants, Ringcon, and their sub-consultant, Veronica Tam, here. So welcome. Thank you for being here with our team. And we also have the state team, HCD, here. And I just want to just give a special thank you and shout out to HCD for, number one, coming to visit us in our community and see us a couple of months ago. And it was great to be able to meet with you all in person and go through some of where we're thinking we can get through this housing element, build new housing in our community, and work on having a compliant housing element. So we really appreciate that. And just a quick mention throughout, this advisory group has been with us from a welcome home strategy that the community started in 2020. And that group sort of, and that effort to try to find a way to build affordable housing in our community and address the affordable housing need morphed into this housing element advisory group, because it was a great group of people. We've got Jan Lindenthal Cox, Jane Barr, other affordable housing developers that have been a part of this with us. Catherine Avila's here. She's also a regular market rate developer in our community. So we really have a lot of really awesome development community as part of this to help us strategize and find ways that we can address our affordable housing needs. So thank you, all of you, for sticking with us with the city and being a part of this committee. This group, this fun group of housing element and affordable housing strategy needs. So I think with that, I want to start out introducing the HCD team. I do see, I think Anthony Arichetto's here. I saw Mao. And Mao, is there anyone else here from your team?
Chelsea might join in. She is in another meeting, but she will try to join in.
Awesome. Great. Do you want to introduce yourself really quick, Mao?
Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Mal Lee, and I am with HCD, like Anastasia said. And thank you, Anastasia and Alyssa, for hosting us on our visit. That was very great. That was a very great visit for me and our team, and we're looking forward to working with you more.
Thank you, Mao. All right, Anthony, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, yeah. Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you, like Mal said, Alyssa and Anastasia, for having us. Happy to be here and hear how Pacific Grove is planning to incorporate some housing elements. So thank you.
Thank you. And I also want to introduce our team here at the city. I have Alyssa Kroger, our housing program manager. And we also have some of our planning staff, which is great, where we have Garrett McCown and Aaron Campbell. It's his first day. There's Aaron with the city. So welcome, Aaron, to our team. Ben, we have our city manager here.
Hi, thanks for having me.
And Greg Rubens, our city attorney, is here too.
Hello.
And I know we have some planning commissioners and city council members. Just wanted to welcome you all as well. Don Murphy and Stephen Lilly on our planning commission. And I think we have Luke Coletti here. And
Claudia Sawyer as well.
Claudia Sawyer's here. Thank you for joining us. I know that they've been our planning commission has been really involved in helping us, sometimes even at outreach events. So I appreciate all of your efforts. So I think we'll just go ahead and do a quick round of welcoming everybody, and maybe just a quick discussion of why you're here and what you want to see in this meeting. So we'll get started really fast. And then I'm sorry, I need to introduce the Rincon team too. So we'll make introductions quick. And Rincon team, we have Veronica Tam. And I'll let them introduce themselves more as part of the presentation, and Ryan Russell. So we'll get there. Really, we'll go through with starting out with Jane Haynes. You're on mute, Jane.
Okay, I'm Jane Haynes. I was very active with the 1994 general plan. I'm not a member of the committee now, but I'm quite interested.
Thank you, Jane. Okay. If you can mute Jane. Thank you. All right, Molly, I see Molly.
Hello, my name is Molly Nance, and I am a recent homeowner here in Pacific Grove, as well as a landlord. My grandmother built a duplex back in 1975, and so I have a grand responsibility now. So I'm very interested in keeping housing affordable, both for homeowners and for tenants. So the dual-edged sword.
Thank you, Molly. And every April we do a workshop with Echo Fair Housing, and we have landlord specific fair housing workshops. So you always have that as a resource as a landlord. And we also do one for tenants as well to let them know what their rights are. So thank you. Okay, let's start with Jane Barr.
Good morning. I'm Jane Barr with Eden Housing, and we own and manage and provide services to residents at Vista Point.
Thanks, Jane. Okay, Jay Gentry.
Yes, good morning all. I'm with Passive House California here at the invitation of Elisa and Anastasia, and I appreciate it. I also live in Pacific Grove, and I'm supportive of affordable housing in a major way.
Thank you, Jay. Okay, Gabriel Sanders.
Hello, my name is Gabe Sanders. I'm the Director of Housing and Community Development Policy for the Monterey Bay Economic Partnership, and also a resident on the peninsula with a deep interest in figuring out how to unlock development, especially affordable development for workforce and people who make our lives possible.
Thank you, Gabe. Jan.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jan Lindenthal Cox. I'm a resident of PG for the past 20 plus years. I'm had a career in affordable housing development. I currently work for a nonprofit that's a affordable housing lender. And I'm also a leader with COPA, Communities Organized for Relational Power and Action. And we're working throughout Monterey and Santa Cruz counties to support cities during their housing element process and to advocate for policies that will advance affordable housing.
Jen, thank you. And I was able to attend with the mayor the COPA event 4 weekends ago, and it was a great event. We had a good turnout, and we appreciate all the work you're doing. Thank you. All right, John Guest.
John Paff, and I live in Pacific Grove and have been a member of this committee for a year plus. To continue to be so. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Jose Torres.
Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Jose Torres. I'm a housing advocate with Landwatch, and I'm here to support the city in any way we can. Thank you for inviting us, Alyssa, and putting this together. And really great that one of the few cities in the peninsula that's actually putting this together as in a very transparent manner. So we're really excited to work with you guys on this.
Thank you, Jose. Catherine Avila.
Hi, everyone. Catherine with Avila Construction. As Anastasia said earlier, representing the market rate developer side, but we also have a special interest in employer-sponsored housing and workforce housing. So that's usually my angle in these kind of conversations. And on a personal front, I'm also a landlord in Pacific Grove of a duplex plus an ADU as of the last 6 months or so.
Great. Thank you, Catherine. Lisa Segal.
Hi, yeah, I'm actually here with Rincon Consultants, and I'm sure that Ryan will get into our role in the housing element update later on.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. Councilmember Coletti.
Yeah, hi. Luke Coletti, lifelong resident of Pacific Grove, as well as a elected council member since 2020. Certainly have a very strong interest in our general plan, housing, and the process that we're involved with currently. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Mike Gibbs.
Hi, thank you, everybody. I'm Mike Gibbs. I'm a PG resident, member of the Economic Development Commission, and I'm glad to hear that people out there are showing up. It's a great turnout. I'm interested in the employer-sponsored housing, and specifically what happens if we win and if we miss the deadline, and the impact of builders' remedy in this whole process. It hasn't been mentioned, and I hope it will be mentioned before the end of the session. Thank you very much. Thanks, Anastasia, for putting this together.
Thank you for being here. Okay, Chops Paduri, Councilmember Paduri.
Yes, hi everyone. I hope you're doing well. I'm here to listen in, but I'm also interested to see how the sixth housing element plays out. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Commissioner Sawyer.
Claudia Sawyer on the Planning Commission. Very interested in the housing element and our focused general plan and seeing how everything unfolds. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Don Murphy.
Morning. I'm a resident and homeowner on the Planning Commission and very interested in removing the barriers that have prevented us from creating enough housing.
Thank you. Commissioner Steve Lilly.
I think I'm unmuted now. Can you? So I'll say the common thing. Can you hear me? I'm a homeowner and resident of this city twice in my life, and the second time for the last 13 years. I'm interested in affordable housing, obviously, and since the Planning Commission will have to weigh in on this thing eventually, it's time that I sat in and listened to what was going on.
Great, thank you for being here. Okay, is there anyone I missed? All right, let's go ahead and have Rincon get started. Ryan, if you want to get your presentation going, we're ready.
Sounds good. Give me a second.
Okay. And Ryan and Veronica, I just want to quickly mention that Veronica and I have worked on a number of projects and housing elements, other big housing documents like the analysis of impediments to fair housing throughout the county, at the city of Salinas, also consolidated plans, annual action plans, capers, which don't worry, it's not a food or a little pickled item, but a HUD document. So I've been working with Veronica for many years, and glad to see her on the Rincon team and really excited to work with this Rincon team. I'm excited for what you're going to be able to do for us. And anyway, just wanted to give that quick background. Thank you.
Yeah, we're excited to be here and happy to be here this morning with you all, and look forward to getting this housing element drafted and out for public review. Is my screen showing okay? Okay, perfect. So the agenda for this presentation, I'm going to give a brief introduction for myself and Veronica, briefly go over the housing element. I'm sure it'll be some information you've heard already, so I'll go pretty quickly through that. Go over some of the work that's been completed thus far in the process, and then any remaining components, and then go over some of the next steps and timeline. So my name's Ryan. I'm with Rincon Consultants along with Lisa. I am in the community planning group here, so do a lot of master plans, general plans. Lately, a lot of housing focused work. So here's just a brief list I have here, and then I'll let Veronica introduce herself. Her list could have been onto another page.
Thank you, Ryan. As Anastasia mentioned, I've worked with her in different communities before. I've been involved in housing related work for more than 25 years, and I've written probably over 200 housing elements throughout my career. So with the 6 cycle housing elements, we are working with the city of well, we've worked with County of San Diego, County of Los Angeles, and County of Marin, and also County of Santa Barbara. We've worked with cities of like Berkeley, San Ramon, Long Beach, and West Hollywood together with Rincon. So we've gotten a lot of housing elements certified this round of the 6 cycle housing elements. So we're very familiar with the really tightened kind of requirements for the 6 cycle housing element. And so we're happy to help. We certainly have some of the, together with Rincon, we've worked on a lot of 6 cycle housing elements, already have a lot of working sessions with HCD staff and understanding where they're coming from, what the review standards are. So hopefully with that learning experience with the 6 cycle, the new requirements of state law will be able to and ready to help Pacific Grove in a much more readily manner. So.
Yeah, thank you, Veronica. So just a brief overview of the housing element. You might have heard some of this information before, but it's one of the required elements of the city's general plan. And unlike some of the other elements, it is mandated by the state to be updated every 8 years in what they call cycles. So we're currently planning for the 6th cycle of the housing element, which will plan for housing and implement programs from December 2023 through 2031. So here's just some of the components of the housing element. This cycle, we're seeing these housing elements be well over 300 pages with all of the technical appendices and that sort of thing. So it includes an assessment of current and future housing needs. So it looks at the city's population and demographics. It looks at the city's existing housing stock. It also looks at constraints to housing production. A good chunk of this looks at how the city's existing regulations impede the development of housing. It also looks at environmental factors and infrastructure as well. The site inventory is another component, which I think you are well aware of, that identifies sites in the city that will meet the city's regional housing need allocation. And for this cycle, I believe it's 1,125 units. We then is a new topic for this cycle to be included in the housing element is affirmatively furthering fair housing, or AFFH. So that's an assessment of fair housing within the city, and it also needs to be considered within the site inventory, as well as some of the programs of the housing element as well. And then finally, the goals, policies, and programs of the housing element. This section either continues existing programs in the city, updates programs to comply with new state requirements, and it implements programs to overcome some of the constraints and needs that were identified within the assessments that I just mentioned. All right, so what was done previously with the housing element? There was a lot of outreach that was done prior to Veronica and I coming on. I was really surprised and happy to see the amount of outreach that was done. So the city held a number of pop-up events at various community events like the farmers market, Good Old Days at the grocery store, National Night Out. The city did door-to-door outreach. I believe I read that there was about 200 doors knocked on. The city engaged with some of the workforce in the aquarium. 2 workshops were held, one kind of an overview of what the housing element is, and then another specific to the site inventory. Stakeholder interviews were conducted from July through December, and then a housing survey was available from April to September to get input on housing needs in the community. And then there was the balancing act tool. If you recall, that was available from October to November 2022, and that gave residents the ability to submit a housing plan for how they see the city to meet their regional housing need. So they were able to choose different strategic areas in the city where they think more density should be put, and areas where maybe the density should remain the same, and try to figure out a way that the city could meet its regional housing need allocation. So the site inventory, so some work was done on the site inventory. A draft was prepared, which identified sites based off of all the outreach that was conducted and some analysis. So the inventory that we looked at included an Excel table with all of the identified sites and their unit assumptions. There was some write-up for some of the downtown sites on their feasibility, some of the existing uses that existed on that site. And then there was like a summary table, which summarized all of the sites that were identified. There was some things that are missing and to have a compliant site inventory. So not all of the sites had assumptions finalized. So that's something that needs to be done. Because a lot of the sites have existing uses or structures on them, a non-vacant site analysis needs to be conducted. There were some sites that didn't comply with some of the state requirements related to low income housing. So there were some small sites that assumed lower income units. So currently the state requirement to assume lower income units is the site has to be greater than half an acre or less than 10 acres. And then finally, we need to take all of this information and do a complete site inventory write-up in what we call housing resources section. So those were some of the pieces missing for the site inventory. And this is another list of items that needed to be complete for the housing element draft. So we need to complete the needs assessment. Some tables with data were compiled, but we need to analyze the information and get some additional data. We need to complete the housing constraints assessment. We need to complete the fair housing analysis. Some of the figures were produced, but we need to analyze those figures and look at some of the census data. And then based off of all of those assessments, we need to come up with the housing action plan, which is where the goals, policies, and programs live. And then we will need to compile that all of those sections into a complete draft. It sounds like a lot, but with all of the outreach that was done and where the site inventory currently is, we can get moving on each of these pieces right now. So that kind of lends into the next steps here in the timeline. So this is basically a summary of what I just said. So next we're gonna move on each of these pieces. We're getting started on them already. So we're editing the site inventory to get that into a good place. Then we're drafting each of the resources sections, the needs and constraints assessment, the fair housing analysis, and then we're going to compile the housing element with the goals, policies, and programs. We're also going to continue outreach during this time. So we'll continue strategic stakeholder interviews. If there's any community events where it makes sense for us to have the city to have a booth there, we'll continue to do that. And then we'll have a third public workshop when the public review draft housing element is ready. And then I'll see if Alyssa is available to go over some of the recent events that the city attended.
Sure. Thanks, Ryan. I'll go ahead and walk us through this next section on good old days. I'll just stay next when we're ready for the next slide. So next. Thanks, Ryan. So the CDD, Community Development Department, tabled a booth both days at the Good Old Days event this past weekend, Saturday and Sunday. We spoke to well over 157 unique individuals and engaged them on activities around affirmatively furthering fair housing mapping and photo testimonials based on housing needs, which you'll see some more in the next slide. Next. Thanks. So the AFFH mapping activity, we basically just printed out maps of the different census tracts within the city and asked passerbys to, based on this key, paste stickers in different areas where they feel there are concentrated areas of affluence, concentrated areas of poverty, areas that might need improved access to resources like transit, grocery stores, pharmacies, and then also areas that may be in poor condition that maybe are substandard and need some repair or rehabilitation. And I think what we gathered from this at a high level was just, aside from what you see on the coast in the green concentrated stickers, area of affluence, everything is really just dispersed throughout the city on kind of a scattered site basis. Next. So our community housing needs photo testimonial, you can see here some of the things folks shared with us was that they're in need of affordable housing, they're in need of rent control, they're in need of both single family homes and multi-family projects for rent and for sale across income levels. Next. And that concludes Good Old Days. Thanks, Ryan.
Yep, no problem. Just wanted to highlight some of the recent community outreach that the city just did. So this is the timeline here showing some of based off of the next steps. So currently we're drafting and compiling the housing element. So we're just getting going on this. We're digging into the site inventory work that was done previously, and we're getting going on all of the assessments. We are aiming to have a draft public review by September. And during that time, we'll hold that third public workshop. We'll have another advisory committee and group meeting as well. If Veronica and I can compile the housing element sooner, we'll definitely try to do that. But we have September here as a deadline date. So after the draft goes out for public review, we'll have a study session with commission and council in October, November 2023. We'll get any feedback from them and we'll make revisions to the housing element, and then we will submit to HCD for their initial 90-day review, which will take us into about February of 2024. So then we'll revise the housing element based off of HCD's comments and have that packaged up and ready to go to adoption hearings in April and May. And then after that, we will resubmit to the state for their 60-day certification review. So that's kind of the general timeline. We'll aim to work at an expedited manner as we can. And then just a reminder, the city has a project website. If you just Google Pacific Grove housing element, it should come up pretty readily. And there'll be information on upcoming meetings, any draft documents, summaries on some of the outreach that is upcoming or has been completed. And then this is just some of our contact information. I'm sure you have Anastasia's contact info already, but Veronica and I are here as well if you wanted to give us an email if you have any questions. And that wraps up my presentation. Really, I just wanted to go over, what work has been done. I know it's been a while, and then go over some of the next steps. We've already gotten started on all of those final missing pieces. So I think we're in a good point and excited to move forward.
Great, thank you, Ryan. I just wanted to see, I know that the community with the shift in our timeline and shift with where we are, if the HCD team wanted to provide any comment at this time about where we are in our timeline and any concerns.
Sorry, looking for the mute button. We don't have any concerns with your timelines. I think you're doing a great job and moving right along. If you run into any possible barriers, please reach out to us and let us know, and we can work with you on that.
Great. We appreciate it. And
Absolutely.
yeah, so far, we appreciate the working relationship, and we know that we've had a meeting already to discuss how we've shifted as a community, and that we're just moving right along. So thank you. Okay, so
You're
I think we are ready for some questions. I see Jane's hand raised. Jane Haynes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I want to be sure I have these dates right. What I understood you to say is September of 23, you'll have a draft housing element. And then in February of 24, you'll submit that to HCD. And then your planned adoption time is April or May of 2024. Is that correct?
We're actually going to submit. Sorry, let me. All right, we're going to submit the draft housing element to the state in November. So they have a 90-day review, which will go November to February. And then we will resubmit to them in April and May.
Jane, I think you're on mute if you had any follow-up there.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. My understanding of builder's remedy is that it will be a possibility beginning on December 16th of 23 until we receive HCD certification. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I see Don Murphy's hand raised. Jane, you can mute again.
I have three questions, if I may. The first is, in the previous work, we were talking about a 20% buffer above the RHNA numbers. And I wanted to know if that was still the plan.
Yeah, when we were looking at the draft site inventory, and Lee, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they had built in around 30% buffer, but we're gonna have a 20% buffer implemented, and that's pursuant to the no net loss regulations.
And if private property is on the site inventory, what communication do we have with the property owner? And sort of part two of that is, if we do have communication and the property owner tells us, I have no interest in creating housing during the next 8 years on my property, do we take it off the inventory?
That would be best practice if we have, direct contact with the property owner and they say there's no interest in this property. It would be best to take that off. But that said, the city will be implementing a fair amount of incentives and different other programs within the housing element that could change that property owner's mind in the future. Does that help answer?
If I may kind of supplement that response to, being on the housing element sites inventory doesn't obligate the property owner to build or to sell, but it does give them the opportunities to take advantage of some of the incentives that the city have, and maybe even flexibility and also maybe increased density as well. So that it doesn't obligate them to sell or do anything, but it gives them some advantage. So I think what we do encourage property owners to think about that is you may not be thinking about selling or building today, but you may change your mind in a few years. And so keep that open, and that may give you more, advantage in the future. So.
And I think I skipped over part one of that question is, do you automatically talk to every property owner whose property may be put on the site inventory? Do we at least notify them that we're planning to do that?
Yeah, I mean, there's no requirements in doing that, but it would be good if the city wants to move forward with notifying all of the properties on the inventory. But like Veronica said, being included in the inventory doesn't require them to do anything.
And my final question has to do with Rincon's experience. And clearly there's a wide range of experience in helping with housing elements. Does that result in, and I'm not saying this is right or wrong, but does that result in a lot of sort of template, boilerplate language in a housing element that isn't written specifically for Pacific Grove, but is just general information for housing elements?
All of the information in the housing element is pretty specific to the jurisdiction. We have to pull specific census data, other regional data, and do an analysis based specifically on the population in the city and also the specific city regulations for Pacific Grove. So it's pretty specific. There's not, pulling boilerplate stuff. There is some regional analysis that is done, for instance, in the county. So we can pull information and analysis that's already been done for in a regional level, but specific to the city, it would be, a pretty detailed analysis.
Great. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Molly, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, in the element are you including any of the water credits that are needed for these additional housing, or is that a completely separate entity to this?
Yeah, we will have to do an analysis on constraints to housing, which includes environmental constraints. So we'll definitely going to have to consider that the water resource issues going on within the region as a constraint to housing and implement a type of program for the city to try and overcome those constraints.
And then for the policy, I think you had a couple of items listed. I think there was like 4 or 5 of them. And then the city's the city's policies was one of them. And how do you have a plan? What's the plan to kind of coordinate with the council and the city manager to everybody align with those in the plan?
I just wanted to interrupt really fast here with this question. Veronica, do you have anything else you wanted to add with water based on?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead. Thank you.
I just want to make sure that we, there's an understanding that yes, we, particularly in the Central Coast area, their water rights is a constraint to the actual development of housing. But that constraint itself does not exempt any jurisdiction from the obligation of planning for your regional housing needs allocation. So we do have to identify adequate sites, and if adequate sites is not available, we do need to do other potential policies and, maybe increasing density or rezoning some areas in order to get to your regional housing needs allocation. It is a constraint, and the city's obligation is certainly to work closely with your water service providers and find ways to increase your capacity. But in itself, it does not exempt the city from meeting the regional housing needs allocation.
Thank you, Veronica. Okay. Ryan, did you want to address the rest of the question Molly had?
Yeah, just related on coordinating the goals and the programs of the housing element. Yeah, I mean, I think I'll defer to Anastasia how we want to kind of coordinate with the council and the commission on the programs. I think it's best to take what's existing and kind of do an audit and see what's working, what's not working. a lot of new programs are state mandated that we'll have to include, and then other programs will be based off of the analysis that we are currently moving forward with right now.
Thank you, Ryan. Yeah, a lot of the policies from the last housing element, if you want to kind of get an idea about what is in there, they're there, and we've done some extensive work with our former housing program manager and with former directors about what has worked, what hasn't worked in the past. Some policies will continue, and we will work with these will be drafted in the draft, and we will be able to and updated from our prior housing element, and anything required by state law will be part of our draft document. Everybody can review that at the time that the draft is available, and we will come to Planning Commission and City Council with those. Okay. Oh, sorry.
I just have one other question, comment, because on the state level, you know, they're requiring a lot of the cities, and then just the process is a little backwards, at least from what I can tell, is that the city has a mandate, and the state has a mandate, and the cities have to scurry around what we're doing, you know, to find the solutions. So is there any component in the housing element to like push back a little bit from the state's requirement? Or is there any force to kind of, well, you know, like maybe we can only come up with 900, not 1,000 plus units?
Molly, I think with our sites inventory, we've been able to identify ways that we can meet the RHNA obligation in our planning efforts, and that's what we're striving to do. So we want a compliant housing element, and that means that we are going to plan for what was determined through the RHNA process.
Yeah, and Anastasia, just as I mentioned before, the regional housing needs allocation is non-negotiable. There is virtually no jurisdiction in the state would have a certified housing element without meeting the RHNA. So that's not something that we can push back on, but the state does work with us quite a bit, and in terms of trying to figure out reasonable and ways to address your constraints. But ultimately, though, having that capacity is probably one of the most critical components of the state's review and getting certification.
And this is part of the reason we did have a visit with the state, so they could understand our community, they could see our community. And I think that was a really good visit a couple of months ago, so that they understand how we're addressing our RHNA through the community that we have. So thank you. I appreciate the state again coming out to visit with us. And we talked about water, and we have a lot of historic properties. There's a lot going on in our community that we need to be cognizant of as we move forward in this process. So we do want to represent our community well. Okay, I see Claudia's hand raised. Go ahead.
Thank you. I just had a couple of questions. When there's that statement to continue strategic stakeholders interviews, who are the remaining stakeholders? How will you reach out to them?
That is something that we're going to look into. I'm going to work with Alyssa and see what interviews were conducted already, and see who else would be good to talk to, especially as it relates to the fair housing analysis that hasn't been done yet. So it's kind of a work in progress, but depending on who it is, if we have a direct contact, we'll just give them a call or send them an email and set up a time to meet and discuss their needs and any policy recommendations that they might have.
Okay. And then when we're looking at public outreach, what are considered healthy numbers? I mean, I see all the events that we've done. I've been at many of them, but what would be considered a healthy number? Because I don't see a significant number of the population that's been involved. And how do we do that?
There's not really a specific number. I think the city just needs to show that they're making their best effort to engage the community. I can say that based off of my experience with other jurisdictions, the outreach that the city has done previously has been above and beyond what's required. Some community events that I go to, one person shows up, and so it's good to see that there's at least, you know, a fair amount of people that are interested and engaged in the city. I mean, obviously, the more the better. So I think we can continue the outreach efforts. But I think overall, from my experience, that outreach that's been done thus far has been pretty well done.
Great, thank you.
Okay, I see Mike Gibbs next.
Thank you, Anastasia. This is Mike. You know, I sat in on several of the meetings last year, and I don't profess to understand the detail of the element. But looking at the big picture on the timeline here, if I understand this right, we missed the deadline in December of this year. Is that correct?
There's the deadline in December, and then there's a 120-day grace period for getting certification that will play into any rezoning requirements. But yes, that is the deadline.
Right. And the grace period is over at the end of May. Is that what this timeline is showing me?
I believe the grace period would end in April.
Yes. And so if the certification review is submitted at the end of May, that means that the grace period will be long past before that review is done in what, July? Is that correct?
In July. Sorry, could you repeat that?
So it's the last point on your timeline is April, May 2024 housing element adoption hearings and submit for 60-day certification review. That means that review can go out until the end of July. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And that means that the grace period is over at the end of May. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think April would be the grace period.
April.
So yeah.
So here's what I don't understand. First of all, the deadline in December is not shown on the timeline. It probably should be, as far as I'm concerned, because most people don't know that that's what's happening. And then what happens if the end of April and we're at the end of the grace period, but certification is not approved? What happens at the end of April?
Yeah, I can see if Veronica wants to answer this, but we are working on a number of housing elements that, you know, we're working with the state to try and get certification review. They've extended past the deadline. As long as the city is making a best effort to get it in compliance, there hasn't been many issues. See if Veronica, yeah.
The main issue with the grace period, and I actually we shouldn't call it the grace period anymore, because it is like what the state law says is if you're able to achieve certification within 120 days of the statutory deadline, you get 3 years to complete your rezoning. If you're unable to do that, you get 1 year to complete your rezoning. Now, so that's what the 120-day significance of that. And so if rezoning is necessary to meet your regional housing needs allocation, what we definitely recommend the city is to start early. Why? You don't need to wait till you get certification to move on to rezoning. You want to get it done as soon as possible so that you'll be able to meet the 1 year deadline if possible. So regarding the rest of the 120 day is exactly like Ryan said, like it really, the 120 days is relating to the timing of rezoning. This round of the housing element has been so difficult for most jurisdictions that even though the deadline there's a certain deadline, but it really takes multiple rounds of review with HCD in order to get through HCD and get a certified housing element. And I can give you some of the stats just quickly so you understand that it really takes a lot of time and effort working with the state and also working with the community. San Diego region, the housing element was due April 15, 2021. As of right now, there are still quite a few communities in the San Diego region that do not have a certified housing element. They're still working towards that. The Southern California region, 6 county, the housing element was due October 15, 2021. As of now, there are about 60-something% of the jurisdictions that have a certified housing element. The rest of the 30-something% are still working towards a certification. So it really does take time. The issue is the fact that the state law has changed significantly regarding new requirements, but the piece of state law governing the timeline you have for completing the housing element hasn't changed. So, more requirements for community outreach, extend the periods for public review, extend the periods of HCD review. Everything compresses the time that you have to do the housing element, but then it doesn't change. It doesn't give us more time. It actually gives us less time with the new state law, but with more requirements to deal with. That has nothing to do with HCD. HCD doesn't write the law. So they're just working with the same kind of like really tight timeline as we are. So I think this timeline, given the fact that we had to do a little bit of a restart, is the best schedule that we can come up with to do an adequate housing element.
Okay, well, Veronica, thank you very
Really
much.
quick, sorry,
Go.
I wanted to see if HCD wanted to weigh in on this, and then I may have Greg Rubens, our city attorney, weigh in.
Yeah, I can provide some follow-up to that. So like Veronica said, we don't write the law. We're working within the same time frames that the cities and the consultants are working with as well. Like Veronica said, the really main thing that the due dates affect are the rezone timelines. The 3-year versus the 1 year, and that's really depending on if that's going to be a RHNA strategy that the city is going to adopt. So really that's the only thing to worry about. We do try to work really closely with cities, when these due dates are coming in hot, to try to get expedited reviews done, working closely with the city to provide informal feedback. Anything we can do to get these housing elements in compliance as fast as possible is all of our goals.
Thank you so much. And Greg, do you want to weigh in a little bit on, thank you, Anthony, again, and on the builder's remedy?
Yeah, sure, glad to. Well, it's important to note that the builder's remedy applies to residential projects that have at least 20% very low income component or 100% up to moderate component. So the project has to meet those categories, and all the builder's remedy just takes away our ability to deny a project based upon zoning and general plan compliance. But you got to remember, it's got to be for a residential housing project for that to apply. And very low or moderate households are 20% of the total units sold or rented to lower income households, 100% of the units for moderate income households, and 100% of the units sold or rented to middle income households. And those are under the federal requirements for affordability. It has to meet those requirements. So, my take on it is that the reason, a lot of cities are not in compliance has been pointed out. And what I've seen is, the case in the news recently is down in Southern California. Huntington Beach has decided to question the requirements under this law, and the state has sued them and are actually asking for additional remedies like the ability not to issue building permits. But I think that would be required when when you get to that stage, and the court could potentially issue an order for that. There's also a possibility that the city can self-certify, and what that means is the city makes appropriate findings that are allowed under the law, that we say our housing element is compliant. We have the appropriate number of units and sites. We meet the requirements of the law. But the gold standard is you want HCD to certify your element, because if you self-certify, then an HCD disagrees with you, then you could get into a dispute with HCD, and ultimately your self-certified housing element might be overturned in court. So you want to definitely, if you're going to go that route, and some cities have done that, you want to make sure that it's you follow the letter of the law and get that self-certification. And they're not mutually exclusive. You could self-certify, and HCD could say, yeah, we agree with you. So that's my understanding of how it would work. But the builder's remedy, it's out there. It's basically prevents us from denying a project based upon zoning or general plan compliance, but it still has to be a qualified project. And in some of in the other regions that have already been through this process, there are some builder's remedy projects that are out there, but it's a very specialized project, and I think I said this at the Planning Commission, the economics of such projects does not go away because of this law or your housing element. They still have to pencil out and work as a project, and they have to have meet these requirements for low and moderate or 100% moderate project. So hopefully hopefully I clarified a little bit. I think the in the chat there's a good attachment from ABAG that Bay Area's okay. So in the chat there's a good attachment that explains the builder's remedy. But it is complicated. And one last point on it is this is all untested. That case in Huntington Beach, I think, is going to be the main case about how this law works and whether it whatever their exact arguments are in Huntington Beach, how it's going to be interpreted by the courts.
Yeah, so I'll just conclude. So thank you very much. The self-certification process, is that on the table for Pacific Grove? And second, if the builder's remedy, which is really confusing to a lot of people, it seems to be disconnected from the timeline and the grace period, if you want to call it that. And it's not clear when the builder's remedy would kick in relative to the housing element. Could it be, it sounds like it's somewhat independent if we launch a building project, before the timeline is completed, that could be subject to the builder's remedy. I'm not sure I get that. And with that, I won't ask any more questions, but I think a lot more clarification before there's any public comment would be good about the relationship between this remedy and where we stand with completing the requirement. Thank you.
Just to be clear, my understanding is that the builder's remedy, theoretically could be triggered as of the end of this year. In my mind, there's some confusion whether it's December 16th or December 31st, but I looked at the law and it said December 31st, but maybe that's changed. But during the grace period, during this quote unquote grace period, that's just when HCD is considering your plan and you still have a compliant to figure out if you have a compliant certified housing element by HCD. So there is a builder's remedy risk as of the first of next year, but I don't, in practice, it hasn't worked that way in other cities is kind of what I've seen. Such a project doesn't just materialize overnight. And the vulnerability period, as I mentioned in the at the Planning Commission meeting the other night, is until you get that certification or you have the self-certification that is accepted.
Anthony or Mal, do you have anything to add to that?
I think Greg explained it really well, actually. I'm a policy analyst, not a lawyer, so I think I'll let Greg's words stand. But yeah, I think he explained it really well. Generally, that's how that the builder's remedy works.
Okay, great, thanks. And I think something else that was brought up is water that you brought up, Greg,
Oh,
at the
yeah.
Planning Commission.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, because there was a point made. Although, when you were, I think what I heard was that the availability of water, you still have to have enough units, taking into account the limitations on your water supply in your local community. But under the law, the availability of water for a particular project remains a basis to deny that project. So the builder's remedy does not apply, which eliminates the reasons that you can deny a project based upon general plan or zoning. You still can deny based upon specific health and safety issues and availability of water. Those reasons for denial remain under the law, even when you don't have a compliant housing element.
Thank you, Greg. And I just want to make sure everybody understands. I think we're moving forward with a great team. We're working through a lot of these issues too in the housing element and trying to make sure that we have a compliant element, and we do everything we can to ensure policies and programs, and we have the input. So I know it's scary to have all these, oh my gosh, builder's remedy and all of these other things, like we have to build 1,125 units, and we're getting caught up in a lot of this scary stuff, right? That feels like, how are we ever going to do it, or is somebody going to come in and do this? But we have to really keep focused that we have a housing element to complete. We have a lot of really important parts of this housing element that's where the focus is right now, and trying to make sure that we do everything to be in compliance with the state, to work with the state. These are things that are really important to our team working together, for us working with our community to make sure that our community is represented in this housing element. Some of the amazing uniqueness that we have in our community, such as our historical properties, our coastline, our amazing downtown, all of these things we can work with to make sure we have a solid program for the future. So I just wanted to keep that in mind. Next, Luke, Councilmember Coletti, have I called on you yet?
No, you haven't.
Okay.
And thank you, Veronica, for kind of updating us and clarifying what this grace period means. As we all know, there's a bunch of Bay Area cities that didn't know and had quite a bit of trouble working that through in real time. If we are only, well, let's first start off with just CEQA analysis. Does the housing element require CEQA analysis, and when will that be done? I don't see any mention of it on the timeline.
It does require, well, yes. I believe our approach is going to be a CEQA addendum, which shortens the time frame for that CEQA review process. So typically we would start that once we have a pretty good idea of the site inventory and any of the major programs that would come into play before we start the analysis. So I would recommend probably starting that close to the study session timeframe, around October or November, where the housing element is in a pretty good draft position, and we can, draft a detailed project description. That's really the first step.
So you're saying, no, so will there be two CEQA analyses, I suppose, one for the housing element and one for the general plan update, is that correct?
That's correct. And yeah, because of the time frame, we need to get this housing element adopted sooner.
Are we going to be doing a mitigated negative deck or an EIR for the housing element?
It wouldn't be an EIR. That we don't have enough time to do that, and I'll have to dive into the site's inventory. But sometimes what jurisdictions are doing is they're doing a brief a CEQA document for the housing element, and then if any rezoning is required, they're doing another analysis based off of that rezoning down the road, and that's just because of these timeframes. It's just too much of a crunch to do a full EIR to analyze all of the rezonings. But again, I'll have to take a look at the inventory and see what is being recommended.
Well, okay, yeah, that'd be good to have feedback on that pretty quick as far as understanding the timeline fully.
Mhm.
I was under the impression that we would be doing a mitigated negative deck for the housing element. You mentioned something about doing an addendum. Do you mean something like, I don't know, what do you mean by an addendum? I'm only familiar with MNDs and EIRs. What do you mean by addendum?
An addendum is where you use a previously certified environmental impact report and you basically tier off that to ensure that based off of this project that there's no more significant impacts than what was originally disclosed in the EIR. That said, a CEQA addendum could easily be the route we take here as well.
So you're talking about maybe a supplemental EIR? Is that what you're referring to?
No, it would be an addendum.
Addendum to what?
Yeah, I just want to step in here. Veronica, do you have anything you want to add on the EIR question here?
I think it's we are doing it to the addendum to probably to the original general plan EIR. That's one option. The reason why we do that is because approving the housing element in itself does not upzone, rezone any properties. It is still just a policy document. So when the city does do the general plan update and that's when your the zoning, the general plan will be changed. So the housing element itself does not promise and it does not change any general plan and zone. A lot of the communities actually do an exemption because the housing element is just a policy document. So that is also a choice to do it. Some community do mitigated net debt. There's just a variety of ways that you can do it. And partially why some of the SCAG region cities are so stuck right now is because they were trying to do an EIR, do the rezoning, concur with the housing element, and the EIR takes a lot longer than anticipated, and then therefore the housing element got stuck as well. So we would like to move forward with the housing element as soon as possible, and then deal with the rezoning if necessary through the general plan update. So
thank you, Veronica.
Thank you. I understand, but I'm still not understanding what environmental review are we doing for the housing element?
I think that's what we said is an addendum to the general plan, to the previous general plan EIR.
The 1994 general plan?
Well, maybe not be that general plan EIR, but maybe addendum to, like Ryan, you guys may know, maybe to some other type of, some other large scale environmental impact reports that covers the majority of the sites that we may be using.
Yeah, and I just want to step in here, like this is another conversation about the CEQA, and we have had discussions with Greg Rubens, our attorney, about what will be appropriate. So once we have a solid draft, we will finalize the determination on what CEQA is required for this housing element. But you're right, we can add it to the timeline, and we will. And we are going to choose an option that is legal and defensible and also accommodates our timeline to get a draft housing element as soon as possible to the state. So
okay, well, I'll look forward to that.
Thank you.
I guess the other question is, and thanks again, Veronica, for telling us what this 120 quote unquote grace period refers to. If we miss the end of the grace period or the extension that would allow us to have a 3-year period to do an EIR for the general plan. If we miss that and we're only giving 1 year to perform the zoning update, do we have enough time? And what I mean, I think that a zoning update to our general plan, do we have enough time to do it in 1 year, and what environmental review will be done for that? Is that going to be an addendum to our general plan from 1994? So still the same question, only in the context of now the general plan, and if we have to do it within a 1 year period, update our zoning. And my understanding is once we update our zoning, and I suppose we're going to be doing it based on a density of 1,125 dwelling units plus the 20% buffer. Once we upzone, state statute does not allow us to downzone. So we got to be very careful about what we do here, because once we change it, there's no going back. So again, I guess I'll focus back on the question about a 1 year period to do the zoning update, which seems a little rushed to me, and what kind of environmental review can happen within that 1 year period. Thank you.
I just want to step in really quick. I mean, we're lucky. We're going to hear the general plan item, update item with Rincon this week at City Council. Hopefully there'll be a decision made to move forward with our general plan update. The rezoning is part of that. I've had a lot of discussions with Rincon about moving forward with the rezone and being ready if we do need to do it within 1 year versus the 3 years. So we are preparing, and if we do need to, that rezoning will require a higher level CEQA analysis, at least in MND. So we'll go forward with that, with those discussions when the time is right. So Greg, do you want to step in with any response there?
Yeah, I just want to say that there's no reason that the focused general plan and the rezoning can't be somewhat in parallel. Other cities have done both their adoption of their focused general plan update and their zoning at the same time. So it's not linear. One has to follow the other. You can develop both of them at the same time.
And I think we're a little bit ahead, as we've gone through the process of doing an RFP, and we are really thinking about taking our housing element seriously, and it's time to think about the rezoning, and we'll be prepared when the decision comes on how we need to move forward. Veronica, did you have anything else to add?
No, I think it's just right now the most important thing is to figure out the status of your site's inventory, the scale of any rezoning necessary. And once we got to that point, then we'll be in a better position to really report back to you what would be the appropriate strategies regarding the rezoning. The other thing that Ryan still have the timeline provided, and what we have planned to do is submit the draft to HCD in November, and then therefore be able to hear back from HCD after the 90-day review in February. But we were planning on releasing the draft in September. Then if there's any possibility, just like Ryan mentioned, to compress the timeline to with the Planning Commission and City Council study session in October and November, if there's any timeline opportunity for us to compress that process, we can submit the draft to HCD sooner. We'll be able to finish that a little bit earlier too, and then maybe move on to adoption before a little bit earlier. So I think everything is this is the timeline that we have proposed, but we'll do what we can to compress it a little bit. But at this time, I think the most critical point is to see the magnitude of rezoning necessary. And we're not at that point yet to conclude what needs to be done. Maybe the rezoning is not, it's not a very large scale, so maybe we can move it, maybe there's a different way to deal with it. So I think we'll report back to you hopefully in just a couple of months.
Okay, and thank you very much for all your clarifying comments here. I'll just sign off here by saying I'm not too worried about builder's remedy per se affecting community character and whatnot, has been outlined by the assistant city attorney. It seems pretty unlikely that that would come in to play, but I am worried about only having 1 year to redo our zoning. That worries me a lot. And I'll just leave it with that. Thank you.
And I think another thing that I can also clarify, so we'll do the best, and then the 1 year to rezone is very difficult, certainly. But our experience and is that as long as we're diligently working towards it, HCD is not going to come back and say, hey, you're going to, we're going to decertify you immediately because you missed like by a month or you missed by a week. Because if we, Anthony and maybe Chelsea or Claire, you guys can chime in on that. My understanding is that the HCD also has a process to take any kind of actions if you're not, meeting a timeline for rezoning. But the most important thing is that you're moving in good faith effort and you're diligently moving towards that goal.
Anybody from the HCD team want to chime in or?
Yeah, I can provide some.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Anthony.
Yeah, I was gonna just say, probably just, restate what Veronica said about, as long as the city's moving in good faith, this shouldn't be something that should be too concerning for Pacific Grove. We typically approach, non-compliant issues with technical assistance, reaching out to the city. How can we help you guys? What's going on? We like to get a good understanding of what's going on and, the city's approach before we go any more aggressive route.
Great, thank you. All right, I'm going to go to Gabe Sanders. Gabe, do you want to ask your question?
Yes, please. So this is probably more for the HCD folks than anybody else. But I'm wondering to what extent the permitting and entitlement and just the whole timeline for a project to be proposed and actually be approved by a city, in this case Pacific Grove, or really any city that's being evaluated in terms of policies and programs on their housing element. To what extent is the timeline of approval taken into account for the realistic capacity of the sites? So obviously zoning is a main consideration to know that there is capacity on the given sites in the sites inventory, but I'm just wondering, given that there are 8 years, and in this case, roughly 7 from the point of certification, if things happen in 2024, how important are the timelines for permitting?
So for permitting and, the step of processing times, we don't really look at it in terms of the site inventory. That will come into the governmental, non-governmental constraint section. So looking at approval times and with regard to non-governmental constraints, how long is it taking from the, the issuance of a building permit to the, the developer reaching out for other permits. And then with regard to, other type of permit processing times, we like to know, your typical time frames for single family, multifamily, and then, comparing that to your neighboring jurisdictions, how typical are your processing times compared to the region? And then, adding any programs to, mitigate any potential constraints, if it's taking you 2 years to process a developer permit, then, that's going to be a red flag for us. We're going to want to see some action on things like that.
Great, thank you. And we have been discussing with our developer community about some constraints and how we can help in our housing element with that. So I appreciate that. Okay, Steve Lilly, I see your hand raised.
There I am. I am muted myself. I have a couple of questions. It was identified there was a buffer of 20%. Is that separately identified or is that part of a larger whole?
That's part of the site inventory. process. So it's not something that city will need to construct and build. It's just a requirement within the housing element itself.
No, I know that, but I mean, is the buffer itself, that 20%, is it separately shown from the other, or is it all part of a larger number?
It all adds up to a larger number, but
Okay.
we'll make sure it's called out separately within the tables and whatnot. This is the, RENA allocation, and this is what it is with the buffer.
Okay.
And I think we want to also emphasize when we look for the sites, this is the target number that we're trying to aim. We're not going to specifically identify which property is going to be the buffer site.
Okay. And then the second question I have is, maybe this is more from ignorance more than anything else, but what is a stakeholder? I mean, that term has been bandied around. We're going to interview stakeholders. What is a stakeholder?
I would say, someone with an interest and someone who is invested in housing development within the city. And so that could be, it depends on the topic at hand. If we're talking about fair housing, it could be those who provide supportive housing services to people, those who conduct outreach to the community. And stakeholders could be developers within the city, like Anastasia mentioned. Yeah.
Okay. And then I appreciate the timeline that you have provided on your chart here. But is there any way that this can be made more specific? For example, I see here September 2023 for the public workshop. Is that September 1st or September 30th? Or, there's a lot of, as it mentioned, ability to compress in this thing that we may need to have. And because I share Councilman Coletti's concerns about 1 year to do rezoning. And, the sooner we need to make enough time, have enough time for the staff and our consultants to do the initial work, especially on the front end. No question about that, to catch up and all that. But is there any way we can make this, more detailed, if not by week, certainly by month, so that we know what to expect as council and commission members?
Steve,
That's
we'll work
kind
with,
of a rhetorical question more than anything else, I suppose, but.
yeah, I appreciate the input, Steve. We'll work with the consultant and continue to provide updates to the timeline. This is just more of a broad overview and where we're at, where we're gonna be in the future. And once we have a draft, we'll tie down more timelines to be more specific. So thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, did you want to say anything else, Ryan? Sorry.
I was just going to say once we have the CEQA strategy tied down, we'll definitely build that into the schedule as well.
Thank you.
Great. And I think I see Jose Torres also raised his hand.
Oh, hi, thank you, Anastasia. I just had a quick question about the sites inventory. You mentioned that some work had been done on that. And I'm asking if it's that portion of the element would be available for public review prior to the actual draft. If it's available, we'd love to see it.
I think we do have some information on our website already. You can look at, Jose, that we did go through what was we have the Balancing Act exercise online, and that is recorded and on our website. And you can we also went through a little bit of what was determined in the sites inventory. There was a follow-up workshop. So both of those are online, and you can kind of get an idea of where we're going with that online. Okay, we have a few minutes left. Catherine Avila, you have your hand raised?
That's all right. If you only have a few minutes left, go ahead. I won't get us down a different rabbit hole.
Oh, you're fine. You're fine. Go ahead and ask.
My question is in relation to the sites inventory and measuring feasibility. It's my understanding that the sites on the sites inventory need to have a good percentage of chance of actually moving forward and being produced into housing to count. So in terms of feasibility, how is the city measuring feasibility from a financial standpoint. Because right now, for me as a developer, that's the biggest impediment, along with zoning, is how do we make this thing pencil? So I'd be curious to know what the city is doing to measure financial feasibility for projects. And this might also be an opportunity for the state to chime in if you've seen other jurisdictions do that successfully. I'd be curious to know how they're measuring that.
Does anybody from the state want to weigh in on this?
Yeah, so this is a requirement in the non-governmental constraints section to analyze, the financial feasibility, cost to construct, and cost of development. Obviously, that's something that the local jurisdiction can't directly control, that being the market, the feasibility. But the local jurisdiction does have to identify programs that they are implementing to, help reduce that cost, help developers out, help these projects pencil out. So there's twofold to that. The analysis should be done in the housing element, and then programs have to be identified to help the feasibility.
And if there are any programs or strategies that you think you would recommend, feel free to send us an email, or we can set up a phone call and talk some of those through to make sure we're incorporating some of those, to make sure some of these sites are feasible in the future.
Great. Okay, I think I've called on everyone who's had their hand raised. I do see people have their hand raised again. We are in the end of the meeting and want to respect everybody's time. Please, I just want to say, contact me if you want to ask the consultant question. I'll be fielding questions to the consultant. It is appropriate to contact me first because we have a limited budget and scope, and we need to make sure that we're not detracted from the main goals of what we are working with our consultant on. So I just wanted to ask HCD if you had any final thoughts or any final words you wanted to say. And I just really thank the HCD team for taking the time. I know you guys are super busy to be here, to be a part of our community today, and help us with the big question of this housing element and some of the work we're trying to do. Thank you.
I just want to thank everyone for attending the meeting today and also inviting us. This gives us a bigger scope of what you are working on with the housing element. We are here to help and support. If you have any questions, if you need any resources, we also have reps who are assigned to AMBAG that can provide technical assistance. And just want to thank Rincon for the great work that they're doing, and we look forward to working with the group to get your housing elements through.
Yeah, I'd also like to say thank you, especially to Anastasia and Alyssa. Also, you guys are all in great hands. I know Anastasia, Alyssa are very determined. Also, Rincon and Veronica are very experienced. So you all are in great hands. And like Mal said, we're always here for you guys. So feel free to reach out to us.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Mal. And the Rincon team, I'm going to let you, I just, again, want to thank everybody. Veronica and Ryan, any final parting words here?
Well, I think it's going to be, you're going to have to make some difficult decisions. And this is something that every jurisdiction faces in this particular update. And so we'll do the best to provide you like guidance and keep you in line with the law and make sure that you understand what the new laws are and what the ramifications are. But, we'll work together. There will be some difficult decisions, but we look to you for your guidance. So.
Yeah, we're looking forward to working with you all and glad to see how engaged everyone is in this process as well.
Great. Okay, once again, thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll be in touch soon. Thank you.